All right, welcome everybody. We are just getting started here about a minute early. So we're gonna stall for a minute and just let people start getting logged in. I will actually go ahead and give you guys a couple of notes just while we're waiting. To those of you who attended Louie's African Violets class last week, I apologize. I was out, discovered I had COVID, so I am back now. But if I didn't send you guys the coupons, I don't think. So I'm going to check on that. And if you didn't get it, you will get it today. I apologize for that. I think as far as announcements for me, that's all that I have. And we're at noon now. So I'll go ahead and actually get us kicked off. Well, Peg, thank you so much for joining us today to talk about fall bulbs. I know this is the best time of year for planting, so this is a great topic. For anybody who is new with us today, since this is a webinar format, we can't actually speak to you during the class. So you're going to send your questions to us via that Q&A box that you see on your Zoom menu. I will be holding those for Peg until she is ready to take questions, and then I will give her those questions. So you guys can send them in that way. If you all have any other issues during the class, please feel free to send me a chat. That's the best way if you're having like technical problems or need me to email you or anything like that. I'll be monitoring that as well. For anyone who is attending from outside of our region, we're based in Virginia, so all of this is geared towards Zone 7. So if you're in another part of the country, or maybe in another country, that's fine. We're really glad you're here. Just make note that your timing and planting instructions and whatnot might be a little bit different. All right, well, Peg, I know you hardly need any introduction as always. Peg is one of our regular instructors and has been for many years. She's based at our Fair Oaks store, works in our annuals department, does a lot of our design greens. Since Christmas is coming up, she's very involved with our greens design. And was on our Gardening Advisor television show back when we had that, and has been one of our primary instructors for a long time, drawing on many years of experience in her garden that is the envy of all. So Peg, I'm going to go ahead and let you get started. Thanks so much for being here today.
Yes, thank you for joining us today. I love talking about bulbs because I love bulbs, and this is definitely the time to get them into the ground, okay? So what I'm really going to concentrate a lot on today is some of the smaller bulbs. We often used to refer to them as minor bulbs, but we really don't do that so much anymore. So we're just calling them little smaller bulbs. And they are wonderful, particularly for the use around the edges of your deciduous shrubs or underneath the deciduous trees. And I have planted quite possibly just about every one of them at some point in all these years. And I really am going to share with you today some of those specialty ones. Now, I will say, I absolutely love the large daffodils and I love the large tulips, but how you use them will determine whether or not you love them later on, because you've got to leave that foliage up after they bloom, because that's what produces next year's bloom. And if it's right in the front of your bed and it's an eyesore, then you're not going to love them at that point in the game. So I'm going to make some suggestions as we go along as to how you can use some of those larger bulbs that have lots of foliage and not be unhappy with that while they're going dormant and producing next year's bulb. So let's start with my very first slide. As I said to you, I'm very fond of bulbs. They're so very welcome because they're among the first things to come into bloom in the springtime, when we're so glad to have color after the winter. So I have a love affair with bulbs, okay? And the very first ones that come into bloom are the Galanthus, 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 commonly called snowdrops. Okay, this, as far as where you plant these bulbs are concerned, they're all good in full sun. And they're all good under deciduous trees and not evergreens because they need some sunlight for that foliage to mature. But I have great luck in my wooded area beneath the oak trees, primarily oaks, but lots of other things too. And often in December, the galanthus will begin to come into bloom. All of the bloom times are very dependent upon the weather. But this, I have masses of these. I've had a lot for years, and they seed about. If you don't mulch too heavily after they've thrown their seeds, then they will reproduce pretty quickly, and I absolutely love them. These are all among ferns and among some of the perennials that are good in part shade. So let's go to the next one. Usually the next in line with these smaller bulbs are the crocus. And there are many varieties of crocus. There are the larger, more hybridized ones. And then there are the species ones, which are quite small and very lovely, really. And they're very good, particularly at the front of a border or in between your perennials or around your shrubs near the front of the border. I do have issues with squirrels digging up crocus. I don't so much with the other things because I plant them deeper. So even with the crocus, I suggest that you plant them a little deeper than you normally would or what they suggest on the package. Maybe go at least an inch deeper with these. And then if you mulch soon after you've planted them, the squirrels aren't as likely to dig them up. Squirrels love fresh soil that has just been dug in, whether it's in a container or in the ground. And so the sooner you cover that soil, the better. And then going to the next one is among the small bulbs, Pushkinia, Puschkinia, Pushkinia. And that one is growing in mass underneath my crepe myrtle. This is a border planting, a heavy border planting that has crepe myrtle and has viburnum and numerous other flowering trees or small shrubs. And this is doing just beautifully in that because all those lose their leaves, and therefore these bulbs are getting enough sunshine to do well. So that's just one of the little ones, okay? And in the following picture, we have small or miniature daffodils. They, along with these other small bulbs, are wonderful to use nearer the fronts of the border. In groupings are best, and this is in between and behind, in part shade, Phlox stolonifera. This is a native perennial, Phlox stolonifera. And I think that that gold of that beautiful little miniature daffodil really is striking along with the purple. Now, among these daffodils, you can find early, mid, and late season. And so you can have them continuously. And among the miniatures, all of those are so easy to work with. And you don't really hate the foliage after they are blooming. Let's come back to me for just a minute, Janie. When I say those small bulbs, the Chionodoxa, 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 the Pushkinia, the Galanthus, these are all those wonderful miniatures, the crocus, okay, and the bacillum. These are all the bulbs that will do the same thing that I showed you with the Pushkinia. At the edges of your deciduous shrubs, in between smaller perennials at the front of the border, or at mass plantings underneath trees or deciduous shrubs for that matter, not evergreens. Planting them under evergreens is not so good because they don't get enough sunshine, okay? But underneath the deciduous, these things are great. Now, introducing another bulb that's underused, and this is an anemone. There are many different kinds of anemones. There's the one that's not hardy, that we carry sometimes too, but this is the one that I love for spring, Anemone blenda, and it comes in white, the mixture that you're seeing here, purple, and these bulbs need to be soaked overnight before you plant them. When you get them, they're really very swiveled up, and if you put them in a dish of water, they swell considerably, and that is really what you should do. They'll come along if you don't do that, but it will be much slower. Now, these are about 4 to 5 inches tall, and so are these. Now, 6 maybe, some might go up to 8. But these are the plants that will really smile at you in the springtime because they're small, they bloom early for the most part, all among these anyway. And it's a nice mixture. And it's a nice mixture with, particularly in the part shade, with the part shade perennials. Then there is another small bulb that comes a little later. And that is I thought I had a bigger package, but I guess, yes, I do. I wanted to show you this because this is the most common one. Mascari, great hyacinths. These are fantastic. Again, they reproduce pretty quickly, but there are some other varieties of them. The one that you most commonly will see and makes a beautiful mass when you plant them again under trees or under shrubs and around shrubs. But this one is very interesting also. Now, deer. Deer haven't bothered any of the ones that I've mentioned to you so far. And you will see deer resistant on this Mascari. However, it is natural and normal for this bulb to put its foliage up now in the fall. All that green comes up and the deer will munch that green. Fortunately, they haven't munched any of mine so badly that it still blooms well in the spring. Now, in the spring, they don't eat the flowers. So the flowers are deer resistant, but they will eat the foliage. So if you go out and you have some planted and you see they've been munched on, that's normal. But don't worry too much about it. But I did feel that it was good to tell you about that. Okay. Let's continue with a couple more. Okay, this next one is one of my absolute favorite tulips. I love large tulips. Yes, they are beautiful. They're pretty much noted for not being terribly perennial, but a lot of them certainly will last well for 2 years. This particular one is smaller, nice long stems, but a smaller flower. And it's a Clausiana, a tulip Clausiana, which is a species tulip. I'll spell that, Clusiana, Clausiana. And they are deer resistant. So far, I have not had deer eat this tulip. Now, it is planted along with all of these other bulbs. I have one very large area that has a large oak tree, It has sassafras. It has a couple of Japanese maple. It has a dogwood. And I have all of these bulbs intermingled in that area. And I have a lot of perennials in and among all these bulbs. You can see wonderful companion plants, and this is part shade. Loves morning sun, but this is a part shade area. It's not full afternoon sun. Blooming is Tiarella. Heucherella is very similar. It is a lovely ground cover plant. The foliage is very attractive, and then it sends up all these blossoms. And the Heucherella is a cross with coral bells and a Tiarella, which is native. And then you've got hosta coming, and you've got fern coming. You've got other things coming along, which are wonderfully interesting. So that's a wonderful use of all these. And in the next is a better picture of this tulip Clausiana, okay? This one is in sunshine, and it is in front of shrubs. And so you can see that evergreen shrubs also showcase things like this. And there's a large grouping here that gets larger and larger every year because they too seed well. And since the deer don't eat them, they're actually perennial. They continue to come back year after year. And if you come back again to me, please, Danny, other tulips that are more perennial, this is the one that I told you, Clausiana. This is very similar species. This one is a species, I think it's Tarda, Tarda, but any of the species tulips usually bloom fairly early, although the Clausianas are close to mid-season. They're shorter. Their blooms are not quite as big, but they perennialize. They come back year after year. And the deer don't seem to like them. So that is a plus, okay? Wonderful. And if we, again, go back to the pictures, please, Danny. I'd like to show you in the next picture. Let's do the next one. This is the area that I was talking about, but this is summertime, okay? After all those bulbs have finished, and this has been going on for years, and so I know that they're holding up well, okay? After that, all the hosta come, and I love the large hosta mixed at the front of the bed with the smaller hosta. And now I have Brunera seeded about in there. And that is the perennial, beautiful little tiny blue blossoms that shoot up, and is after the bulbs are finished, then they come along. So that's more color. It's like the flowers of a forget-me-not, but it's the perennial forget-me-not. Brunera, Brunera, okay, with the hosta, with fern, and with all of that Tiarella and Heucherella. There's a lot going on here. So you have color all summer with the hosta. Now, as far as hosta concerned, yes, they are deer candy, absolutely. And I have way too many deer. But I do spray with Vivex, and if I'm consistent with it, then they normally leave them alone, okay? But you do have to be consistent with it. Now, let's tell you a little story about this particular area. There are a lot of oak trees in that area. And any of you who have oaks will realize that this is a mast, or what they call a mast year for acorns. I could put my finger on the ground just about anywhere in my garden without touching an acorn. They are so dense this year. And so I'm hoping that the deer will at least earn their keep by eating a few of those acorns. In the meantime, in the last few days, I have spent a good bit of time on my knees, picking up these acorns. And as I'm started at one corner of this bed, I'm also cutting back the various perennials and getting ready to put down a little, well, this would be in lieu of mulch, because I love, in this particular bed, I love to use the compost, okay? And I do compost my leaves, but it's not nearly enough to take care of what I need. And so, you know, we do sell that in bulk, and that's wonderful. So that is what I use, and like to put on about 2 inches of it. And that is nutritious for all of these things. I find that I don't have to heavily fertilize any of this as long as I use that composted leaf mulch. It's fantastic. But if you don't get out and get those things up off the ground to the best of your ability, and reaching into those ferns and getting it out, and reaching into those hostas and getting it out, because they will all sprout. Some sprout in the fall and some sprout in the spring. And the squirrels and the deer will never be able to consume the number of acorns that are there, okay? So I advise you to go ahead and get it up now. And by the way, in this bed, I think I mentioned it earlier, there's also sassafras. I do love that plant. All right, Danny, let's go back to the pictures.
Next one.
Yeah, please. This one again is under small trees, deciduous trees, those that lose their leaves. And it's mixed. This one's mixed with a lot of fern in between the fern. And it's leucojum, Leucojum. It looks like the snowflakes, but it's much, much bigger. And they're called snowdrops. They're quite prolific. They reproduce pretty quickly. So after you've had a grouping of them in for 4 or 5 years, you can lift them and transplant them. Now, you could do that at this time of the year if you know exactly where they are. I have many, many bulbs accumulated over all these many years in one place. I mean, living in one place. And unfortunately, I have to be very careful when I dig, because it's very disappointing to put a shovel into the ground and come up with tulips or daffodils or whatever bulb happens to be there. It's very disappointing. So unless you know pretty much exactly where they are, then it's better to wait and divide them after they've bloomed in the spring. Next one. Here we have the Chionodoxa. Again, I showed you earlier a picture, one that's sort of pink. These are blue. And they're really sort of two-tone. And they're low. They're 5 inches maybe. And again, mixed in with those miniature daffodils, which are so complementary to each other. And again, in groupings. And now we're being told, oh, please do leave the leaves. And I do leave a lot of leaves at my house, certainly not on the lawn, and at the edges of the beds where they'll blow out and look untidy in the wintertime. I do compost all of my leaves, and I think it's important for you to do that if you have the space for it. I do have the space, and I do sort of, I'm hesitant to call it lazy man's, because it can be a pretty good sized job. There's a lot of it, but I mix it with the straw. The straw mixed layered with the leaves, because I can't mulch them. There's too many, so they go in whole, and therefore they don't break down quite as fast. But I do a nice layer of leaves, and then I put a nice layer of straw, and that helps to aerate the pile. The pile is never going to get hot like some piles that would kill weed seeds. I'd never put those things into my compost. In fact, it's a distance away from the house, and so I really don't put anything other than the leaves and the straw. And then when the grass is being cut, those clippings get turned into that pile. It only gets turned 3 or 4 times a year, but I'm able to use it in the fall before I have to do the next compost pile. So it takes a year for it to break down completely, having been turned only 3 or 4 times. But I love it. It's nutrient rich, and why haul them away when you can do that if you have the space? And in the next picture, you will be seeing again, you're going to see a lot of these miniature daffodils, because there are a lot of different varieties and they are gorgeous. This is a grouping, and it's complemented by, again, part shade, Pulmonaria. This is a gorgeous, almost evergreen perennial, and it usually stands 8 to 10, maybe 12 inches at times, and usually blue, but pinks and variations of that, with a variegated foliage, which is very attractive. And it too drops seed, not obnoxiously. I love it when some of these things seed. The only time I don't love seeding is when they're difficult to get up, okay? As a few of them are, okay? But most of the ones that I have that I've heavily encouraged seeding, and Pulmonaria is one of them. And in the next picture, I am showing you the taller tulips. I love these big tulips. And as far as being perennial is concerned, if you plant these tulips, let's say normal is 6 inches. If you plant them 8 inches, they have a tendency to be more perennial. And fertilization is very important. It's good with all these bulbs when you're planting them. But when you plant these tulips, I like to use the bulb tone. I don't do bone meal. I do bulb tone because it's a better balance. And if you don't have the bulb tone, plant tone, they're all made by Espoma, and they're very, very similar. They're all natural, organic, and they are slow release, long lasting. And when I plant my bulbs, I plant them the proper depth and a little deeper. I cover them with just a little bit of soil, and then I add some fertilizer, a little more soil, a little more fertilizer. I would say if I'm planting a grouping of 5 of these, spaced a couple of inches apart, I'm going to put a handful the first time, a little more soil, and then another handful, and then finish filling in. The Darwins and the Triumphs have a tendency to be more perennial than the others, but try that planting a little bit deeper and see if it doesn't work for you. And these are planted in front of a shrub that is underused as far as I'm concerned. It's Kerria, Kerria, Kerria japonica. And in the winter, it loses its leaves, but in the winter time, its stems are a beautiful shade of green. And so it's not just your bare brown stem. It definitely has some emphasis in the winter time. And all of these are growing in part shade underneath those oak trees. Now, this is an example of where, as I'm looking at this picture, the left-hand side is in more shade. And in that area, there are azaleas in bloom, and there's fern, a lot of different types of fern. There is a geranium that I absolutely love, mycorrhiza, and it's very fragrant foliage. The foliage is beautiful, and it blooms in the springtime. It's native. And then next to that is the Phlox stolonifera, which is native and is a perennial. And you've got some of those daffodils there, the smaller ones. But as you go around the corner, the upper part of this bed is in a lot of sunshine. It definitely gets full morning sun and then gets some afternoon sun also. And in that area, in front of a lot of beautiful camellias, the Sasanqua camellias, which are coming into full bloom right now in my garden. And I love going out and walking through those camellias because they're just so beautiful. So in front of that, and particularly in the upper part of this area, I have planted a lot of perennials that are appealing to our pollinators, and it really is working. I have really increased the size of this bed. Yes, I've usurped a little bit of the lawn. I can't take too much of the lawn because we as a family have to have that lawn for playing our games, etc., etc. And so we're a family that needs some lawn, and a lot of people do. Okay. Plus, you have to consider maintenance too when you're thinking about some of these things. How much do you want to devote to lawn, and how much do you want to perhaps increase the size of some of these borders so that you are contributing to the pollinators? But in the center of that bed is where those large daffodils are planted, because when they finish blooming, that foliage is substantial. Amazingly, the large tulip foliage doesn't hang in there for terribly long, and so it's not so difficult to deal with. But the larger daffodils, when they're used in a border like this, or if you have a townhouse and you want just small groupings of them, plant them to the mid or to the back so that you have something that grows up and hides that foliage, which I do. I have a lot of those perennials that are in there that are appealing to, as I said, the pollinators. Oh my, there were some salvias in there this year that the hummingbirds absolutely loved. But I have a number of borders, so I'm taking care of those pollinators pretty well. The next one, please, Danny. Again, in a sunny area. So I do have some sunshine, yes. And there are certainly, all of these bulbs will do well in sunshine, and they'll do well planted between perennials. As you're seeing here, this is the edge of one of those cascading Japanese maple, which I absolutely love. And then to the side of that, there's, I think it's skimmia in part of it there, and some fern too that will do with the sunshine. And there's lamb's ear, Stachy's lamb's ear. And in front of that, you're seeing thyme. And so I have groupings there of daffodils. I mean, not daffodils, tulips, okay? And those are the Darwin tulips. And I did have those come back for at least 3 years. And I've got a color pickup there too, which I totally enjoy. The color in the tulip matches the color in the Japanese maple. And it is very much contrasted with the color of the lamb's ear and the thyme, because there's golden thyme and just the solid green thyme. And in the next picture, another but later blooming smaller bulb, but larger than the ones that we just talked about. This one's going to be 8 to 10 inches, and this one is very prolific. So planted in an area where you have more space because it multiplies pretty quickly. And this is a wood hyacinth. Hyacinthoides is the proper name, wood hyacinths. And it is planted around a hydrangea. Then very much complemented by the grass, the Hacanacloa. And that's gonna lose its summer color soon, the Hacanacloa. It's going to turn brown for the winter, but it has great presence, even though it's brown. And so I do not cut it down in the fall. I wait until spring to do that, okay? And then the following picture is absolutely underused and absolutely beautiful. I think we are going, yeah, enjoy that picture for a second and then come back to me, please. Okay, Danny, let's come back. This is a mouthful, and there is no common name that I'm aware of. Nectaroscordum. 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 It's tall, it's late. It gets to be 3 to 4 feet tall. And then the blossoms you just saw, just beautiful. And also, this is underplanted, okay? Now, what you saw behind that was allium. And I am absolutely infatuated with allium. And there's several different types. The ones that I have here in front of me, these are the drumstick kind, and these are the tall ones, okay? These can get 3 to 4 feet tall, some of them. Different varieties here, but large ball type blooms. And then you step down somewhat to the Christophi. This is a shorter one. I would say more in the 2.5 to 3 foot range. And it's very starry looking. Very interesting. And then you step down a little lower and there's Schuberti. This is really a huge 4 to 6 inch blossom. Very star-like. Now they look very delicate. And they are not. They stand up to the wind and the rain and all of those things. And when they have lost their color, I leave them in the garden because they're still attractive. And amazingly, when I was cleaning out that bed that I told you I was cleaning the acorns out, in the front of that bed gets a good bit of sunshine, even the afternoon sun. And when I was cleaning, there are some of these planted in there with some perennials and some spirea. I actually still have some of these floating around in there. Now, I have in the past taken my spray can very carefully out, and after they've lost their color, sprayed them the normal color that they are. And it looks for real, you know, just for fun. And it was a good conversation piece. Other people will harvest them and spray them and put them in their Christmas trees, whether it's green, gold, or platinum, or whatever color. They're very interesting that way. So those are underused bulbs too. And when we're talking about, let's see what I've got coming up next. I better talk about these first. Okay, in the process, not this year, but previous, because I needed the pictures. In the next picture, actually is in the process of kind of how I do this. This is a small area in the front of a perennial border, and I have put in some kale. I love the kale because it goes through the winter really well and is very colorful. So I put the kale in, I put my violas, which I'm very fond of violas. They're very floriferous, and a few pansies. And in between that, you can see in the lower part of the picture, particularly, I think I masked this area with those small bulbs, particularly the crocus, okay? Because this is actually a garden that's near the side of the road that people enjoy as they pass by. And so that's really sort of how you go about it, you know? But this could be, in lieu of the cabbage, etc., perennials that's already in your garden. And you simply add an annuals, add in the annuals, or add in violas for fall and winter, and then put the bulbs in between. Okay. And the following picture is beginning to show you what I do with containers. I am really, really fond, particularly of using tulips in containers. This is a massed grouping of containers above a brick retaining wall, which can be enjoyed and viewed from my porch. And I just have been enjoying watching the hummingbirds there until 3 days ago. I think they decided to go south. But what you're seeing here are the things that I planted in the fall that have come into being in the spring. And that is kale that is in bloom. You see the sends up tall shoots, 3 to 4 feet tall, and is magnificent for days and days on end. You get that beautiful foliage of the kale. And that particular one is the red boar, B-O-R, red boar. But there's others too. And I planted the tulips in the fall. I will be doing that on Sunday because I'll be Saturday or Sunday. I'll be taking out the things that were there for the hummingbirds and replacing them with my tulips and pansies and other things and the kale, okay, because it's magnificent, okay. And just a quickie of the next one that we'll show them is a little bit closer up of those tulips and how attractive they really are in those containers. And the following picture is also one that's finished up and I've taken the bulbs out of, okay. But you can see in here I have the coral bells for fall and winter, and the chorus is the grass, and then there's the fern and the pansies, and you can see a little viola or two in there. Now, in the next picture, I really got carried away that particular year, and oh my, was it beautiful. And the beautiful thing is that it all came into bloom for Easter, okay. Now, in the following picture, I wanted to tell you about planting bulbs in containers. I have large containers. None of them are allowed to sit on the ground in the winter time. I don't take all of them in. I rarely have breakage. I have well-fired terracotta that holds up quite well. I will lose one every now and then, but I have far too many to take them inside. And a lot of my really well-made ceramics hold up beautifully also. So I put my landscape fabric in the bottom of that container, little square of landscape fabric with a really good potting soil. I put in a couple of inches of potting soil, and then I space out tulips or daffodils as you wish, and then plant my plants around, and like that big red boar would go in the middle. I might shift that bulb over a little bit and put 2 or 3 pansies and violas in there, or whatever you're going to put in that pot. It'll come up between those perennials and between those kales and perennials, okay. Now, you will here layer these bulbs. Put in a layer of tulips, put in a layer of daffodils, put in a layer of the small bulbs, and that's fine. Give it a try. Maybe it will work for you. I'm not as happy with that because there are times when some of the early blooming ones will look a little untidy by the time the others come along. I much prefer to choose one, possibly two varieties. You could do the tulips down deeply and then plant your plants in, and you could actually tuck in some of these miniature daffodils, just a few of them, or some of these smaller bulbs, and a few in the tippy top, and it gives you an awful lot of color. Now you will be fertilizing those containers. And I discovered when you think, did I replant these? No, I didn't, but I should have, because my tulips were nice and big and plump when I took them out. And I should have gone ahead and put them right into the ground. And I didn't, but I will do that this next year because they were well fertilized. When I planted this planter up, I used my Plant-Tone or Bulk-Tone, doesn't matter. Going into winter, you don't want to heavy fertilize. That's a light fertilization. And then I began to fertilize in the spring, in the early spring. And so those bulbs really got good nourishment, and they were nice and big bulbs. So that's one way to have nice sized bulbs. Now, I enjoy very, very much. I particularly enjoy, and I will mention, come back to me for just a moment. I will mention also, among the tulips, I have some great loves, and that is the peony flowered ones and the parrots. Here's some mixed parrots and fringe. This picture doesn't do it justice. These are all strikingly beautiful, and they're very late. So if you've got the space, and particularly if you want to put some into containers, they're fantastic for that, just great. Okay, I love, love, love having these out in the garden, but we also love, love, love going out and picking them. When you pick your daffodils, put them in their own separate water for 3 or 4 hours before you mix them with any other flower, because they have ooze a little substance that other flowers don't like. It's fine as long as you let them sit in their own water for 3 or 4 hours. But oh my, for all these years, my children, my grandchildren, and now my little great grandchildren, and this is Clara, and this was last spring, so she's growing up quite quickly, is to enjoy them not just in the garden, but as cut flowers. Okay, Davy. So I really wanted to thoroughly cover some of these things that I absolutely love, in addition to the larger tulips and daffodils. And you can have those over a period of time too, if you look carefully at bloom time on there. You can't say this is going to bloom the 15th of March because we don't know what the temperatures are going to be, and that's all controls when these things do. And you don't want to plant them in an area that is known to be very, very wet, okay, because they don't like wet feet. And what people don't realize, unless you're an avid gardener, and sometimes some of us get mixed up with it, determine what your drainage is in the winter time, because plants are dormant then. They're not using all that water. And if you have water sit for a long, long time, it can be anathema to some of these bulbs, okay? So with all of that, Sally, do we have questions?
We do. Just a quick reminder to everybody, if you have any questions, please feel free to submit them to the Q&A box. We will get to as many as we can. And if we are not able to get to your question today, we're happy to follow up with you following the class. So I'm actually going to tie together the last question we received with the first question that we have, because they go together. So the first question is, did I understand it correctly that tulip bulbs only last a few years? So can you talk a little bit about the breakdown that you were discussing between some of the ones that last a little longer and some of the ones that last not as long?
Absolutely. Yes, that is very true. And I can't give you a really great explanation for it, for obviously they do a pretty good job in Holland with this, keeping things going. There are differences in how long they'll last. I mentioned to you that if you plant them a little deeper than is recommended, they seem to last better. They don't divide off as quickly, okay? But there are a few that are more perennial. I have the Clausiana, that small one, come back constantly for years. And it does seed around, which is wonderful too, because I keep getting increasing numbers of these, and I've got the space for it, so it's fine, you know. And then people ignore the little species tulips. They're not very big, okay? And the plant can only be tall, but the flower is nice. And you know, they're nice and closed until a hot afternoon, and then they open up flat, and they're absolutely beautiful. The species tulips, they come back also. Maybe not quite as good as the Clausiana, but these are very good about coming back also. And here again, plant these just a little deeper than is recommended, okay? Plus, as I mentioned to you earlier, these are not eaten by the deer at my house. Now, there are no guarantees with deer, okay? But I have, on all these years, and I've got way too many deer, I have not had them eat those bulbs. Now, among the taller varieties, the Triumph and the Darwin types seem to be a little more perennial. But as I said, if you put down your bulb tone or you put down your plant tone when you're planting them, that'll help get their roots going. And when you see that foliage begin to emerge in the spring, is a good time to add and just gently rake in if you can, otherwise sprinkle there and water it in. Again, with the plant tone or the bulb tone. And when you do that fertilization and you planted them a little bit deeper, they seem to form that bulb better.
Okay. Okay, so that leads us into the first question we received, which is, so for perennial tulips, can you, if you're planting them in containers, can you leave them buried in the containers until the next bloom season and they're likely to come back, or do you need to do anything special with them?
I have not left them in the containers through the seasons, okay? I certainly have missed, a couple of years ago, I put in not the Scylla, I put in the great hyacinths in the edges of the tippy top. So the tulips are daffodils. The large daffodils are beautiful also. In the containers, if the container is yay deep, they're planted way down here, okay? With just a little bit of soil underneath, maybe 2 inches. And then you planted those, and then you plant in whatever else you're gonna do. I added a little bit of the great hyacinths to the front. They come through anytime, anywhere, okay? And they got left in and they did fine. I personally haven't left them because when I change out my pots from the pansies after danger frost is over, so this is toward the last of April, the 1st of May, I take all of that out, okay, and either replant the daffodils out in the garden. I did not do the tulips, but I will in the future, okay. Now, I have planted a lot, and you can do this, like in our black plastic pots here that our shrubs and so forth come out of, perennials, nice big ones. I have laid down many times landscape fabric, filled the big ones with my bulbs, any of these bulbs, line them up in there, pull that landscape fabric over, tucked it down so that the varmints couldn't get in with those heavy side pins, left it that way over winter. And when it was about time for them to begin to emerge in the spring, I would open that up and they come through beautifully. Then you can take those bulbs and you can put them in your containers or whatever you want to do with them. Now, will tell you that the daffodils that I've done in that fashion, I usually, when they're finished blooming, put them back out by the shed in a place where they can sit over summer. And yes, I have reused those, okay? But when I've done them in the mix, I change it out. But if you
Gotcha.
plant them separately, hey, go for it. I think it'll work.
Okay. So I apologize if I missed this because I was answering a question that was not related specifically to this class for a tech issue. But I have a container bulb question for Peg, please. Is it okay to bring a container with planted bulbs in the garage for the winter? That protects the pot. Do the bulbs need some sun?
The bulbs don't need sun in the winter time, okay? If there are no plants in them, you could do that as long as you added a little moisture every now and then. You don't want those to go bone dry because they will have put down some roots. So you certainly can store them in the garage. No problem. Just add some water every now and then. Don't let it go bone dry.
Okay. Next question. Are there any bulbs that are native to the eastern United States?
You know, I'd have to look up some of that because I'm
Okay.
looking out through here. I'm not seeing any natives, okay?
Okay. Yeah, if you're interested, that's something definitely to check up with us on later, and we'll see if we can what information we can get. All right, next question. I hear of some people just throwing bulbs in the ground, not caring if the tip of the bulb is up or not. Can they be planted that way? Do you have to be careful in how you're orienting them when you plant? Or
Well, they obviously have
how you're placing them.
an up and down, and you can see the vestiges of a few little roots, and usually there's sort of a pointed in on the other side. So I wouldn't purposely plant it upside down. However, these bulbs have a tendency to right themselves. If they fall on their sides, no problem. They'll straighten up. Okay. They're determined to grow. And probably if you planted that baby upside down, it would send out its shoot and it's going to try to find the light. So
Gotcha. Okay.
I wouldn't do that on purpose, but yeah.
Alrighty. This is the last question we have for now. How do you recommend protecting against squirrels?
How do I recommend? Well, the first thing that I mentioned to you is cover the soil after you plant it. In my containers, a lot of times I'll use very, very fine gravel, the 3/8 inch, okay? And I'll put down a good inch of that. I love to do that because I hold my soil down from the top. If you fill your soil all the way to the top, it is extremely difficult to water it. So you don't want to do that. You want to hold it back some and then add a good 1/2 inch of that or a good 1/2 inch of mulch. And I have used, this year I tried something different and it seemed to be working for me. I had heard that the cedar mulch would repel mosquitoes. And maybe that's true. I've got so many, I wasn't real sure about that, but I suspect it's true. But I decided in the front area to try that and see what would happen. And I put a good 1/2 inch of that in those containers that you saw above the wall. And I didn't have any problem with slugs. So that was a benefit. And the squirrels did not dig in them either, okay? So covering that soil is one good way to do it, okay? You will hear people say, plant it under hardware cloth or the larger wires. that's a pain for me, and I don't want to do that, you know. Yeah. Other than
Um,
that, that's the best thing to do.
Alrighty. Okay, a couple of quick more questions, and then I think we'll be finished. So just to confirm behind you, is that the red board kale?
Yes, it is.
Okay,
And
that's
it's
what I thought.
gorgeous. Oh, and
Yes.
there's one nice thing about that too. You can, I'll bring this one up. It's like a tomato. You can plant it up with eyeballs. You can literally snap off these bottom leaves and plant it deeper, okay? And then it'll be a little shorter and very, very full. So it's just great. There's one here planted with just the pansies underneath that, you know. But there are a
Yeah.
lot of other plants that are lovely in addition to that are nice. Coral bells, the ferns, heucherella. There's a lot of nice perennials.
A lot of options.
Yes.
Okay. We have two more questions. I'm going to try and see if we can get to both of these, but I am going to make note for anybody who is asking questions about containers. If Peg, if you can answer this, but we're actually going to have a whole class on Q&A for overwintering containers. My colleague Andy Donath is going to come in and he'll answer questions on how to make sure that your containers survive the winter, the best ways to take care of them. So, and yes, we will be sending the plant list. So here's our last two questions. One is, how often should you divide bulbs?
If, generally speaking, you can look at how well they're flowering, and when they back off flowering a little bit, it's time to divide them. But usually 4 to 5 years, and
Okay.
then separate them out.
Okay, and last question related to the containers. Like I said, we'll have a whole Q&A session on this for those of you who want some more information. But Peg, how do you preserve your containers? Do you just elevate them off the ground?
You absolutely do not ever want to leave any container sitting on the ground because they will absorb that moisture. If you have used saucers, and I've got to do this myself now, before the freezing weather hits, if you use saucers over the summertime, which is a definite advantage to help keep those plants watered when it's hot, take those saucers out now. Take the saucers away, because if that saucer collects water, it will break that pot, okay? Probably the saucer too. So remove any saucers that you have, okay? The other thing is, they don't have to be terribly elevated, but you don't want your plants to sit directly on your deck anyway. So pot feet, or raising them on something that's attractive, or even brick, something that gets it up a little bit off your deck so that air can move under it to some degree. But generally speaking, with my slate that I have or stone that I have, it can sit directly on that, and it's not a problem as long as it can drain. You don't want to sit it on a surface that
you don't want it collecting moisture, correct?
Yes.
Like, yeah.
And do not attempt to overwinter Mexican pottery. It will not overwinter. This is dependent upon how well that pot has been fired, and that's why they're more expensive. Our Italian terracotta is made with high quality clay, and it's fired well, and therefore it's frost resistant. That does not mean that it won't break. And every now and then I will lose one, but it's rare. Particularly the ceramics are amazing to me, that I've done so well with those.
Yeah, I know those are a big investment. Yeah. So, all right. Well, that was our last question. So again, for anybody who wants to talk, they have questions about selecting material protection for containers over winter. I know bulbs are big for containers, and I know lots of other people have plants and containers they want to keep safe during the winter. So that class is coming up in a few weeks. Peg, thank you so much. We're getting some nice notes. Thank you guys for sending those. And I will be following up with the recording, a coupon, and the list of plants that I typed out in the chat for you all during the class. And again, for anybody who attended Louis' class last week, I am sorry you have not gotten your email yet. I will send it out. I will send that out, and I do apologize about that. So if anybody has a follow-up with any questions, please feel free to send me an email and I will forward it on to Peg and make sure that she can get back with you. And you can also come visit her at the Fair Oaks store. Peg, do you have anything you'd like to wrap up with?
Just thanks for tuning in. And we have so many talented people here with so much to offer. So keep tuning in.
Definitely.
Have
All right.
some
Well, thank you
delicious-
all. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.